The Great Stink was an event in central London during 1858 in which the hot weather exacerbated the smell of untreated human waste on the banks of the River Thames. The scientist Michael Faraday said, "Near the bridges the feculence rolled up in clouds so dense that they were visible at the surface." Charles Dickens wrote that the Thames was a deadly sewer. Journalist George Godwin wrote that, "In parts the deposit is more than 6 feet deep, and that the whole of this is thickly impregnated with impure matter." A reporter for The Standard described the river as a pestiferous and typhus-breeding abomination. In Parliament, Prime Minister Disraeli called the Thames a Stygian pool, reeking with ineffable and intolerable horrors. Sadly, we are the haggard inhabitants, the desensitized citizenry of a second great stink, which began the moment the Ghostbusters remake of 2016 splattered a gross, retch-inducing, candy-colored effluvia over our screens, and continues to this day with the habitat-polluting fecal matter of Velma, where the character of Fred is so emasculated he literally doesn't have a functioning dick. But I'm here to tell you, dear friend, fellow traveler, that amidst all the frustration, identity politics, creative bankruptcy, and near-literal bankruptcy of Hollywood, there is some reason for cheer. Our grievances are twofold. We dislike unrelatable, identity politics-driven screenwriters who, in the words of Lydia Tarr, have had their souls constructed by social media, and who glom onto existing franchises they had no part in imagining or developing, and whose deepest instincts are for making the properties more inclusive, i.e., draw it more into the orbit of their own experience, ahead of more prescient motivations such as character development, narrative originality, witty dialogue, or any wider sense of originality. We also dislike the bigger implications for the legacies of the original shows. It spins our melons to think that not only are such beloved properties being divested of their magic, spirit, and time-honored appeal, but that younger people will experience them as adaptations, distorted through the funhouse mirrors of modern sensibilities, dubious indifference to masculinity, and modern screenwriters' entrenched gripes, wish fulfillment, and self-inserts. But consider this. Looking at data about Google engagement of search terms and topics, it becomes clear that these new iterations of shows and movies are like Chipotle. They go in packed with flavor, but go through the collective cultural system and are expelled quite quickly. The rigmarole of online tension about an IP being bastardized, full of background and gender swaps, sexual identities, and all the other forms of identity politics. Snarky, neurotic, or smug characters who scarcely grow or change, except in the self-acceptance or wider acknowledgement of their aforementioned identity politics subsets. The heated, desultory discourse, the wildly skewed and divergent critics and audience scores on Rotten Tomatoes, the shills and the flakes, the celebrity condemning online hate in a recorded message on his phone from the egalitarian relatable environs of his car. All of it flares up like one crass incandescent firework, but just as quickly scatters and dims. Online interest in Scooby-Doo, in blue, is briefly overridden by interest in Velma, in red, and it is clear that that interest in Velma is already receding, and will dip below Scooby-Doo again, forever. Consider this chart for online interest in Star Wars: A New Hope in blue and The Last Jedi in red. Interest in and the enduring appeal of the original easily eclipses the multi-million-dollar Disney product, and will forever. Consider this chart for online interest in the original Willow film in blue and the new series Willow 2022. The brief blip of interest in the new series only served to bolster nostalgic interest in the original, with the original riding far higher, which it will forever. Most important and heartening is this graph, which demonstrates that The Lord of the Rings: The Rings of Power, in blue, languishes far below The Lord of the Rings original films in interest, during and after the peak of The Rings of Power's promotion and marketing, and irrespective of its billion-dollar budget. In fact, again, the release of the new show only served to create a surge of renewed interest in the originals, which are more popular and will be forever. When Sir Ian McKellen or Bernard Hill passes on, there will be an outpouring of grief and bittersweet rewatch gatherings. Decades from now, no one is going to give a shit when a cast member from the Rings of Power pops their clogs. There's something else heartening. My initial fear that the emasculated, awful, weak, indecisive male characterization in the Rings of Power might resonate with or settle into the impressionable minds of young men watching. As it happens, though, they weren't actually watching. 71% of the show's audience is 35 years or older, according to Nielsen's latest streaming data. So take heart, fellow traveler. Yes, modern Hollywood sucks balls, and so much of the content is indulgent crap that winds us up and does our heads in. But these adaptations, these products, this content, it isn't enduring. None of it will become an indelible part of the culture. To make things that last, you have to bring heart and imagination. And if you're a screenwriter, your first impulse shouldn't be reinvention, but to sublimate your own whims and ideology in service of the source material that landed you a gig in the first place. You're there to replenish existing properties, not try to fix them or reimagine them in your own image. Because if you do so, it's most likely your contribution will end up as just a small blip on a graph.